And that really is why I say that the key to world domination, chimps and tuxes. I'm telling you, you put together an army of... Oh, we're on.
Oh, hey.
Hey, you guys are here.
Missed the context. Speaking of context.
Yeah, speaking of context, what do you say we start talking about context? And we start talking about concurrency. And we start talking about transactions, which, as luck would have it, that's what this module is all about. Module 5, managing transactions and concurrency.
Not chips? Not chimps and...
Not chimps and tuxes. No, that's a different MVA. So what we want to start off with is we want to start off with the basics of working inside of a web application, and then we want to turn our attention to dealing with concurrency and turn our attention to dealing with transactions. It's just not listed on the module overview. So let's start with our web application here, and let's kind of walk through the basic steps here, like what's special about a web application. And you're going to notice that this is really high-end animation here. I spent about a week and a half putting this together, so I hope you'll appreciate it when it comes by. So we edit the request. So we make a request. So I say I want to edit an album. So I go to www.whatever.com, whack albums, whack edit, whack 1, typical in MVC. So we say edit. And then what's going to happen is we're going to send that over to the app, and the app is going to take that request, and it's going to go back to the database and load up the data, and then it's going to build up the form, and then it's going to send that back out the door, and then now I'm left with that form that shows me the album that I can now go in and edit. Now here's really where the animation shines. Here we go.
See it.
Ooh,
Oh,
yay! That's about the best I can do in PowerPoint. Yay! But the point that I'm trying to make here is you'll notice that everything else falls away, and the only thing that I'm left with, the mouse holding the cheese, so to speak, the only amazing animations.
I love the studio.
What you're left with is you're just left with that form and nothing else. So the object that was initially created on the server is now gone. Now, why is that important? Well, the reason that that's important is because Entity Framework uses entity tracking to detect changes. But it can only track changes to objects that were created with the context still in scope. The moment that we send that page back, the moment that that page is returned, our context goes away and the scope goes away, and that object is now disconnected from the context. So when we send the object back to the server using that object mapping that MVC gives us, which is awesome, the problem is that Entity Framework is now going to see that as a brand new object. So when I go to save that back, I've got a little bit of a problem. So what you would notice is if you just simply decided to call maybe attach and you put it onto the context, it's going to look at it and go, well, I don't know what to do with this. It looks something new to me, and it would, try and save it back. You obviously can't use add, so you've got a little bit of a problem there. So what we need to do whenever we're doing an update or if we're doing a delete is we need to attach it back and make sure that we set the state as modified, or, of course, if we're going to be deleting it, deleting the object. Now, and then, of course, save the changes. One little thing that's worth noting here, and this is really kind of a propeller head type of thing, sort of an advanced scenario type of thing, is that when you use this scenario, that if you just go in and you tell Entity Framework, hey, look, the object has been modified, Entity Framework doesn't have reflection built in to figure out, okay, well, what's actually changed and update only those properties that have changed, but rather it's going to update every single property for that object, for that entity. Now, performance-wise, it's not going to make a bit of difference. Yes, there's going to be a smidge more data that's going from your web server back to your database, but nothing that's going to impact performance. The real issue is if you're doing any form of change tracking inside the database, and you need to be able to show exactly which columns it was that were updated. Unfortunately, it's going to update every last one of them, and so that's going to wind up breaking working there. So that just poses a little bit of a challenge there. Again, it's not a big thing, but there are some people that get a little bit concerned about that, and that's why I always like to mention that. Okay. In any event, let's go ahead and actually take a look at how to delete our entities. And let me open up the correct window here. There we go. And now I'm going to go back to my repository, and I'm going to add in my update and my delete methods here. And by the way, while Adam was talking, I was multitasking a little bit, and you'll notice that I did real quick throw in a dispose. And I suppose if I'm going to, that rhyme was really unfortunate. I suppose if I'm going to really kind of close everything off here, I should also go in and just override dispose. Override dispose. There we go. And let's go ahead and just simply say context, or what did I call it? Repository. There we go. Dot dispose. There we go. And base dispose. Beautiful. Okay, and you'll notice I didn't bother with the full pattern. I didn't bother actually saying disposing or not because I don't have anything that's unmanaged. So I'm okay with that. Again, if you want to take that to the next step, you're absolutely more than welcome to do that. In any event, let's go ahead and add on the next method. So let's go ahead and say public void update, and again t entity. There we go. And now what I'm going to say is context entry, and I'm going to add our entry in there, our entity. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the state to be modified. So now I've explicitly told it, hey, look, this has been modified. I could also go in and specify that it's T, and then now we can save that back. So I can do that in just one very simple step.
And that actually saves you 2 steps of being able to add it to the context and setting its state as modified. That does 2 operations kind of at once for you.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So doing that in one shot. And then as far as the delete goes, I'm going to do this with the ID. So we'll go ahead and say delete ID, and then we'll just go in and say, what do I want? I want dbset dot find, and we'll pass in that ID, and then I'm going to say db set dot there we go, remove, and then I want db set find, and then the ID. Okay, so what I'm doing, again, in just kind of one fell swoop, is I'm going to load the object up, and then I'm going to tell it to remove it. Now, again, let's talk about performance, because performance has been a big bit of conversation here, that you might be looking at this and going, wait a minute, isn't this now going to wind up making 2 round trips to the database? Sure. And the answer to that question is no. And the reason that the answer to that question is no is because we haven't called save changes. That save changes is automatically transactional. So it's going to take all of those different operations and send them all up in one shot. So all of this will be done on the server, on SQL, and we're not going to have those round trips. So don't worry about a performance hit there.
And somebody had actually asked in the chat room earlier about at what point in time, when does the context kind of look at cache results versus when does it go back to the server to look for things? Anytime that you use the find method, you are looking inside of your context. If it has it in there, it's going to use it. If not, it goes back to the server. In this case, you've added to the context. It hasn't gone back to the server. You're calling find on it. So you're staying all contained within your same little realm before you even go back to the server.
Absolutely. Yeah. So this is not going to incur a performance hit. It's not making multiple round trips, so don't worry about that there. Okay, so now I've got my update, now I've got my delete, and if we wanted to, just to sort of prove it, we could go back to our artist controller, and then we could just simply add in, let's just kind of make my life a little bit easier here. Let's just go in and paste, and I'm going to say int ID, and then I'm going to say var artist equals repository find or get, and then my ID. There we go. And if artist doesn't equal null, return, or if it equals null, there we go. I want to return the not found. Not found. There we go. Otherwise, we'll return it with the artist. Beautiful. And then let's go in and do the other side here. And then rather than doing add, we'll go in and do update. Update. There we go. And so now that will actually give us the ability to save the changes. And so let's just go in and create the view for this. Real quick, right-click, add view, and edit. And I want edit, and I want this on artist. Beautiful. Chugga, chugga, chugga.
Love it when a plan comes together.
Absolutely. And this is going to yell at me because it doesn't know or needed an ID. So let's pass in ID 1. And first artist, and again, I'm very creative, so I'm going to call this updated artist, and now we'll hit save. And now you're going to notice that, sure enough, and let me make this a little bigger to make it a little easier to read, that sure enough, that's now updated artist, and now that's been saved back. So that's really the catch there, is that whenever you're going to be doing any form of your update or your delete, is that you have to remember kind of that workflow that you've loaded up the object, you've sent it down to the user, but now you've been disconnected from them. So you have to then attach it, set the appropriate state, and then you can go ahead and save that back. Now, along those same lines, the next thing is that when we send the object down to the user, who knows how long they're going to sit and stare at that? That it could be 30 seconds, it could be 20 minutes. Who knows? And while they've got that page up, it's very possible that somebody else could go in and make changes. So if I bring up the edit screen and I'm looking at it, there's nothing to say that Adam isn't sitting over there with the exact same album up, going in, making changes, and he hits save. Now, if he hits save, I, of course, don't know that. Now, you could get, all sorts of kind of fancy and maybe do something with Signal R and shoot something down and all of that, really crazy stuff. Yeah. And by the way, we do have a Signal R MVA if you're interested. Shameless plug. But the fact of the matter is that if somebody else has changed an object, I want to make sure that I'm not going to allow the user to save that data back without, at the very least, prompting them and saying, hey, this has changed. What do you want to do? Now, we have two options when it comes to concurrency. We have optimistic concurrency and pessimistic concurrency. And with optimistic concurrency, we're, optimistic. Glass half full, that we're assuming that nobody has made any changes to the underlying data. So we're just going to operate under that assumption, and away we go from there. But there are going to be times when maybe we've got a lot of volatility, objects are changing constantly, or in a more common scenario, that the resource that we're talking about is very limited. So for example, if we're talking about, say, concert tickets, we don't want to allow the same ticket to be sold twice. So in that case, we're going to need to use pessimistic concurrency. Now with pessimistic concurrency, what we're going to do is we're going to flag the item as, say, not available, or flag the item as read-only, and then when we go grab it, we're either going to automatically limit and not allow items that are flagged as unavailable to be returned back, or we're going to potentially show the items that are currently in somebody else's cart, but maybe gray them out or flag them as unavailable or whatever it is that you want. So we're basically either assuming that something's going to change, or we know that we've got a limited resource, so we just need to prevent the entire situation from coming up in the first place. Entity Framework supports optimistic concurrency right out of the box, and we're going to see it's very easy for us to go in and add in and incorporate. That there's two ways that we can go in and do this. Just add in a timestamp, or choose what column it is that you want to be your concurrency check. For optimistic concurrency, however, this becomes a little bit tricky because Entity Framework doesn't have a built-in capability to do this. this is yet again where having a repository is going to come into play, because typically with pessimistic concurrency, what you're going to do is you're going to set some column as a flag, so maybe unavailable, and set that to 1. Where what I want to do is make sure that every time that we're doing that get all, that we're only grabbing items where that unavailable is set to 0. Centralizing that code inside of a repository is going to be key to making that happen. If you're trying to do all of that off of the data context directly, what's going to happen at some point is you're going to forget to put in that filter, and then you're going to have a bug that's going to be rather difficult to try and track down. So again, you want to use a repository. All right. Let's turn our attention to optimistic concurrency, and how does optimistic concurrency work? Well, the way that this works, and there's 2 ways that we can do this. One way is by just simply creating a row version or a timestamp. Now, row version and timestamp are synonymous, meaning that they mean the same thing. And what's going to happen inside of SQL is it will automatically flag that row as its row version. Every time that somebody modifies that row, it will automatically update that to a different value. And then Entity Framework, in turn, will go in and check that row version. And if it's changed since the last time, then it will know, wait a minute, I've got a problem. And it will throw an optimistic concurrency exception, which I had on this page here. So that's what it's going to wind up throwing. So it's going to add that where statement to go look at that row version. And then if it turns out that it's changed, it's then going to throw that optimistic concurrency exception. So let's see this in action, shall we?
We shall.
We shall. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I apparently need to install an update, which I'm going to worry about later.
System goes down, middle of demo.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would probably be bad. All right. So let's go back to our artist class. There we go. And then right here, all that I'm going to do is I'm going to say timestamp. Boom, and then I'm going to say public, and it's got to be a byte array, so we'll just simply say byte, and this is going to be row version, and let's go in and say get and set. Now, I am going to need to recreate that edit view just to make sure that it now has that additional item, and I'll show you how that's going to be handled in a minute.
I'd like to make a statement.
Please.
Earlier I mentioned that code first migration is my favorite Entity Framework feature.
Yep.
The timestamp attribute happens to be my favorite attribute, property.
Wow.
In Entity Framework.
Bold statements.
Of what you can do with it. We're going to look at some really cool stuff today on what you can do with this.
Okay.
I'm excited.
Cool. Yeah, I should actually mention that. Adam's going to come back to this in the next module and take a look at how you can manage concurrency in kind of a more advanced scenario there, and show like side-by-side comparisons and things like that. Okay. In any event, what you're going to notice is that there is our little row version there. And you could also, if you wanted to, just simply set this up as a hidden if you didn't want to display it out. And actually, you know what? That's what I'm going to do here. Is I'm going to go in HTML hidden for model and row version. Okay. There we go. Because I really don't want to display it out, so we'll just put it inside of a hidden field. Yeah, exactly.
Like 10 text boxes, each with a binary byte value inside of it.
Yeah, we'll expect everybody to start going in, updating the ones and zeros there. Okay, cool. So now I've got that. Now I think I'm all set and ready to go. We're going to find out. And let's go in and say edit 1. Please display my edit screen. Please display my edit screen. Okay, cool. So now you're going to notice that we've got our first artist there. In the background, Adam fired up Management Studio. I'm going to be playing the role of Adam here. And he went in and he said, I want to mess around with Christopher. So there's our little artist. I want to update TBO artists. You probably want to not use master for that.
That's a good idea.
hey, you
Avoid
know.
master at all costs.
Exactly. Set name equal to from SQL Server Management Studio. There we go. Where artist ID equals 1. And before I do that, let's actually do kind of a before and after select. So let's say select everything from DBO artists, where artist ID equals 1. And then we'll do that at the end. And let me make this a lot bigger here. There we go. Hey, look, now we can see it. Cool. So there's our select statement up at the very top. So we're going to see what it looked like before. We're going to update it, and then we're going to see what it looked like afterwards. Engage. And, of course, the zoom doesn't work on the bottom. But here's what I want you to notice is we started with first artist. And you'll notice the row version there of 00007D1. And then you'll notice that we changed it, and now our row version is 00007D4.
It's changed, automatically handled on the server side. You don't have to worry about it.
Exactly. Yep. I didn't do anything at all here. OK. So now let's come back over here to my little app, and let's do from browser, and let's hit save. And sure enough, you're going to notice that this wound up giving me an exception. And the exception type, and we can see it right here, is the optimistic concurrency exception. Which would also then mean, in turn, that what we could do, if we go back to our controller, is on the save for the edit. Here we go. Is let's go in and Control-K, Control-S for surround with, and let's surround this with a try block. And then on the exception, this is going to be an optimistic concurrency
DB
exception. Did I type that in correctly?
Start with DB. I think it's DB optimistic concurrency exception.
Optimistic concurrency exception.
Is it?
Yeah. Here. I'm just making sure I'm right. Yeah.
Oh, yep.
Yep. OK.
Don't ignore me. I'm seeing if you're on your toes today.
I appreciate that. OK. So there is our little catch block. And so now inside of here, I could go ahead and kind of do whatever it is that I might want to do. So maybe I just simply say, oh, I don't know, viewbag message equals sorry, that didn't work. Adam beat you to the punch. We'll just blame that right on Adam there. There we go. And let's just go in and say BR. And then let's go in and let's say return and view and our artist. OK. So we'll just kind of display the artist right back out. And let's go into our edit view. And then up at the very top, at if not string dot is null or empty viewbag dot message, and then let's just h3 style, because all our messages need to be in red, color : red, or Rebecca purple. You know, I guess that would work too. Viewbag message. There we go. OK, so that will go ahead and display out. Let's go in and do this one more time. Let me make sure that I'm not using the database. I'm going to try and just do this without having to close out and reopen. OK, let's reopen our edit. There we go. So there's our, again, our first artist. Let me go in and there we go. Come here. Use that database. Execute. OK. So once again, now we've gone in, we've made the change again. Let's go in now and try and save this one more time. Ha! You dink. Edit 1. There you go. Huh.
I didn't catch what was here.
It didn't throw the exception that I wanted.
Did you add the timestamp
Yeah.
back when you bound back to your controller?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I created it as a hidden field. Yeah, and then I've got my, and I did build it, right? Yeah, up to date. I'm good. Okay. That was sort of weird. Let me see. Did I update that? SMS2, execute. Okay, so that's now been updated. Wibble, save. Optimistic concurrency exception. System data, entity, core.
There you go.
System data, entity, core. Edit. Catch. Optimistic concurrency exception. I'm not losing my mind. That is the right exception. You know, this is my own fault. I was thinking to myself at lunch, you know, all of my demos have worked perfectly. Interesting. All right. You know what, let me do this real quick. I'm going to spend about 30 seconds on this. I'm going to see if I can fix it. And if not, then I will come back to this after break. And I want to just attach to process. And I love the attach to process. Not enough developers use that.
Oh, it's the best thing.
Yeah. So that way, because I really don't like using the debugger unless I'm actually debugging. So I'm just like all about Control F5. So if I get in a situation like this, or I sort of realize, hey, wait a minute, I've got an issue, let me just make sure, save. Let me make sure that just a regular save is working. Edit, test, and yeah, okay, so that's working. That's good. This is why you do test-driven development, you know, to avoid this exact scenario. Let's go in and go back to our edit screen. So edit, there we go. Let's execute. So now it's SMS2. And now let's go in and wibble and save. Okay. And okay. And let's just make sure that my row ID is there. It is. There's my row version. Okay. And update. Yep. Do I want to continue being notified? Nope. Save. Save. DB update concurrency exception. All right. That's weird.
That's one I always use, DB update.
Yeah.
To be honest, I'm not sure when you would use one or the other. I think DB update actually gets initialized with an optimistic concurrency exception.
And what's funny is the page was displaying optimistic concurrency exception, which is what I was expecting.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, there you have it. See, we're really cooking on this show. And let me just.
I was surprised we didn't see a layover on the screen right now, like some eggs being cooked.
Yeah.
You guys are slacking back there. Oh, all right.
There we go. Okay. So now, yeah, we're just going to slam that down again. Let me make sure I'm built. I am. Okay. Let's edit one, and we'll close all this out. All right. So last time, let's go in and reconnect this. And let's go ahead and use the right database and execute. And now it's SMS2. And now let's go in and hit save. And there we go. So sorry that didn't work. We've got the line break right in there, which is sort of funny. And then Adam beat you to the punch. So that was what we were looking for. And it is going to just perplex me, and I'll come back to why it wasn't doing the optimistic concurrency. I swear to you I've done that. I swear to you.
I believe you.
All right.
I believe you.
In any event, so there is the optimistic concurrency. Now the question is, you know, well, what happens, especially if you've been using an existing application? So what happens if you're using an existing application and you've implemented a row version for yourself in the past. That maybe you decided that we just didn't want to use the timestamp. Maybe we've got a legacy database where we were just doing it manually, and we've now got just a version number, which is sort of a classic way of handling concurrency back in the good old days. Well, fortunately, very easy for us to go in and manage this. All we have to do is just add on the concurrency check attribute to that particular property. So let's just add it in, shall we? Let's just demo it and see it in action. So now let's come back over here to artist. I'm just going to comment this out. I was like commenting rather than deleting when I'm doing demos, so that way if you come back later and you want it, you can just grab it. So there's our concurrency check. And I'm just going to say public int, and let's say version, which is spelled like that. And then we'll just add on a get and a set. Now, here's sort of the catch, is that unfortunately, in order for this to work, unlike the timestamp where SQL automatically took care of it for us, it's actually up to us to now manage this on our own. And this is once again where repositories come into play, because then what I could do is I could declare my update as virtual. And then, I love this, one reference. And then I can see right there that there is the little reference. I can see what's going on. And I can actually just, double click on it, which will take me over to, that reference, which is not what I wanted. That's okay. Let me, I want, my artist repository. Okay, so let's go in and just override that real quick. So we'll just say override and our update. And so all that I now need to do is just say entity.version ++ to go ahead and just increment it by 1. And then we'll just call base update and let it update the entity for us. So very easy, because I'm using a repository, for me to add that functionality in. But again, that's going to be up to me. The other big thing is I also need to make sure that that's going to be passed back as part of my edit. So you'll notice that I'm going to add in my version. And again, I'm just going to mark that as hidden. So now let's go ahead and build. Let's go in and disconnect from our database here. Disconnect. Perfect. And let's relaunch this. OK. Now, when I bring up item 1 here, you're going to notice that we're back to first artist, which is where we were a couple of minutes ago. I'm now going to reconnect, just like we did before. And I'm now going to do my execute on the right database. And you're going to notice that there's our version number. And again, like I mentioned before, unlike before, it's not going to increment that version number automatically for us.
It's up to you.
It's up to us. So if I actually just left it like this, so I've modified the value, right? We all agree I've modified the value? If I leave it right there and I just come back over here to my code and I say changed and I hit save, you're going to notice, oh, I know why. Oh, for crying out loud. Oh, this is going to take me a minute.
We have all day and night.
No, I know exactly what my problem is. My problem is I need to do, thank you. I need to do 2 saves here, because what I need to do is I need to try and save it without the version first. So let's just go in, and then we'll say save changes. And then let's go in and increment and then base update the entity. And then we'll go ahead and say save changes again. OK, there we go. Now this will work. Now this will actually save everything back for us. And this will actually work very well for me in an upcoming demo.
Fingers are crossed.
It's my own fault. I kept thinking to myself, hey, this is awesome. Nothing has failed yet. Oh, I should know better.
When you're here for like 6 hours during the day, it's near inevitable something's going to happen.
Yeah. Okay, so there is our first artist, and let me just prove real quick, this works. It works, okay? We all agree it's now editing. Yay! Now, let's come back over here to our management studio. Let's go in and reconnect. There we go. And now, let's go in and execute. Again, you'll notice it's currently at version 1. So if I go back in and if I tried to edit this, let's just do this real quick. Starting. Save. Okay. There we go, and let's bring back up that edit screen. There we go, and let's go in and update this. So it went from starting to SMS2. If I now go back in and try and change this, you're going to notice this is going to save successfully. The reason is that it did not automatically update that version number. That's our job. So what I now need to do when I do my update statement is make sure that I also update the version to be the version +1. There we go. And so now, let's go back in and hit edit. And now, let's go back in and issue my update statement like before. You'll notice that now my version is 4, and now when I try and save, now I'm going to get that error message. So a little bit clunky, I admit it. I apologize for the clunkiness on the demo, but here's the point. The point is that if you want to do optimistic concurrency, and you want to do that with a timestamp, that's easy. Just create a column, flag it as timestamp, Bob's your uncle. If you want to do it with your own custom column, then you've got a little bit of a challenge just because it's now going to be up to you. Now, here's actually good news, and I can sort of keep using our little example here. Hey, Adam, I'm going to put you on the spot here. How many times am I calling save changes?
Once, twice.
Twice. That's a problem. The reason that that's a problem is because what happens if, for whatever reason, this part right here succeeded, and this part here where we tried to save it back with the new version number failed?
That would be bad. You would have your database in an inconsistent state that doesn't match what your app is hoping for.
Yep, that's bad. That's bad. Okay, so we now need to fix this. So let's kind of roll on in to dealing with transactions. Now, here's the good part. Save changes is transactional. So, in other words, if I go all the way back to our initializer, and inside of our initializer, we have our save changes down at the very bottom. Everything up above that is going to be inside of one transaction. So this will automatically call begin transaction, insert, 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 commit transaction. It'll automatically do that for us. Nothing that we have to do to make that work.
Hence, the context is a unit of work object.
Exactly, which is fantastic. The problem, however, is unfortunately, if we have to call save changes twice, it's going to create one transaction and then create a second transaction. So how do we deal then with a scenario where we need to maintain that transaction across multiple calls? And the answer is to use the transaction scope object. And I love the transaction scope because it's just so easy to use that all I have to do is come back over here to my controller. And then right here, where I'm about to call update and then save my changes back, is I just simply say, KS, do I have a using? I do. Fantastic. Using. So I'm just simply going to say using transaction. There we go with the caps lock. Transaction scope. Scope equals new transaction scope. I need a DLL. Add reference.
System train.
There we go. Thank you. There we go. So now I've got my transaction scope. And then right here at the very bottom, all that I need to make sure that I do is just simply say scope complete. That if it gets to dispose before it sees complete, it's going to roll the entire thing back. Now, what's also really nice about this is that all the rest of my code stayed the same. And of course, the way that exceptions work is that if an exception is called, we're now going up in our code. We're going out of our code rather than down. And so if this threw an exception, then what's going to wind up happening is it's never going to see that scope complete, and it's going to roll everything back for us. So it is just that easy for us to do. Now, I'm going to leave this inside the controller, and I'm going to check this inside the controller. But one big thing that I would like to kind of mention and also close this with is, honestly, from a design perspective, that's too much inside of a controller. That really this should be inside of a service and let the service handle all of that for us rather than us being responsible for dealing with it. But transaction scope is the easiest way to do it. It's worth mentioning, if you do want to get kind of really fancy, that you can go and create your own transaction object and manage it manually if you so desire. But transaction scope makes it so easy. Just use it. And it will automatically realize that you fired up a connection. It will automatically realize that you're about to update a database, and it will automatically enlist everything inside of a transaction. So it will manage it all for us. Just that easy.
It's
just
pretty amazing.
That little update. Yep. Fantastic. All right. Well, hopefully I didn't jinx your demos for the last module, although I do want to add a demo to the end there where we'll deploy out to Azure. So I still have one more opportunity for a demo to fail.
Somebody mentioned in the chat room, they said, when the demos fail, Martin said when the demos fail, that's kind of when you learn the most. So sometimes this is good to see.
I like it. And hey, they all worked in the end. And that's the important part, right? Yep. We got to see how it all works.
That's right.
In the meantime, we'll go ahead and take 10, and then we'll come on back.
Take care.